Everyone. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Friday. My name is Desiree Perez. I lead marketing here at LinkedIn. I am very, very excited today because I think we're going to have a very interesting, intriguing, and insightful conversation about healthcare marketing on LinkedIn and just social media trends and what do we need to consider. But before we officially start, I just would love to go over a few housekeeping items. One is that the audio streams directly to your device. There's no dial-in option. We are having a Q&A session at the end. This is a conversation. If you have questions, comments, use your emojis, chime in if you agree, share your perspective, because it's really a conversation for our marketing community. And last but not least, if you are looking on your screen on Zoom, you can change it to gallery mode. We will be spotlighting the speakers, but if you'd like to keep your cameras on, you can. And with that, I would like to introduce our speakers and get started. So on today's agenda, we are definitely going to talk about some trends that we've seen from 2021. And as we move into 2022, what's relevant for you as a healthcare advertiser, marketer, or someone that's looking to reach healthcare audiences on LinkedIn. We have two exciting speakers, both from the client side as well as the agency side. And we have an interesting and intriguing moderator, Alex Bell. So let's get started. I'd love to introduce Alex Bell. Alex leads our healthcare and business services segment at LinkedIn. She has over 20 years of experience in consulting and was a partner at KPMG. Alex is a customer-centric individual and loves having conversations with customers. So I'm really excited to introduce our moderator for today's fireside chat, Alex Bell. Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Des. I love that. I've never been called intriguing before, so thank you.
You are.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're so excited about the conversation we're going to have today with these two dynamic speakers. And let me start off by introducing them to you. First, we have Leslie. Leslie Kozak. I think someone is off mute, maybe? Okay. So Leslie Kozak currently serves as head of B2B corporate marketing at Optum, a leading healthcare technologies and services company. She's leveraged over 20 years of her expertise in marketing, including a strong focus on thought leadership and demand generation in the healthcare industry. Leslie leads multiple integrated audience engagement demand generation campaigns targeting the C-suite audience in the healthcare market. So Leslie, welcome. We're happy to have you. And then we have Ryan. Ryan Burchenow currently serves as the Vice President of Social at CMI Media Group, and he's focused on healthcare and innovation. He's a seasoned social and digital marketer with a track record for implementing successful social media programs in a wide array of verticals. So welcome, Ryan. So if Ryan and Leslie, you will come off mute. In traditional LinkedIn fashion, what's one thing that's not on your LinkedIn profile? And so Leslie, this can be fun. So let's start with you.
I get to go first. Okay, well, there's a few things not on my LinkedIn profile, but I would say if I was going to pick one thing right now, my Christmas list is not on my LinkedIn profile.
Oh, and I want to see what's on that list. Fantastic. And Ryan, what's on yours?
That's a really great question. Probably to geek out a little bit, the fact that I am a huge science fiction fan from Star Wars to Marvel. So I guess that explains why I'm a futurist at heart, as well as a failed astronaut and an aspiring superhero.
Oh, fantastic. You'll have to share like your best sci-fi books that you like to read. Okay, let's get started, right? So in the last 2 years, clearly the landscape of healthcare has significantly changed. We've seen so many disruptors, right? From audience demand, healthcare marketers changing their strategies and tactics, to new stakeholders' concern. How people are connecting has been changing. And we've seen content engagement and the intersectionality between agency and end customers, just to name a few. So just before we jump in, let's share a few stats. We've seen engagement with healthcare topics like medicine, health, wellness, and insurance. There's a 28% increase on LinkedIn year over year. And in addition to that, we've seen that a greater activity on LinkedIn includes a 40% increase on comments and share year over year among healthcare community. And we've also seen a 14% increase in health and pharma spending, which is really interesting, right? Because it makes this the fastest growing industry after computing products and consumer electrics. So today I'm excited, Leslie, to talk to you and to Ryan, because you're coming from two different distinct places, right? One on the agency side and one in the in-house marketing side. So, and talk about really weathering the pandemic and what they're looking forward to for the future. Which brings us, Des, I hope you're ready, which brings us to our first poll question. What are you looking forward to learning from today? So get ready, everyone. A, best practices for reach healthcare audiences. B, get insights and best practices regarding social media. C, learn more about LinkedIn as a social media platform. Or D, you're just here to listen to Des' music that she had on earlier.
I know, it's the holidays. The votes are coming in. Wow, I'm seeing we're up to 107. Wow, it's really close, really close. Wow. I am going final. Okay, I think we're good. I think I can end the poll. Okay. Last one. I'm gonna end it and I'm gonna share the results. Are you ready? Drum roll.
I'm ready. Oh, okay, 75% best practices to reach healthcare audiences. Well, the good news in all of this is we're going to talk about all of this. So that's the good news. So let's get started with our panelists. And we'll start first with best practices and achievement. So Leslie, first of all, congratulations on your ITSMA award. Such a great accomplishment. What is the biggest achievement as a healthcare marketer for you this year?
Well, it is that ITSMA award win for us, I think. And we have a lot of great achievements, but this one was special. This is an award that is judged by our peers across the industry, so it adds some credibility to it. We picked up the award for advancing thought leadership related to our C-suite persona program. Mm-hmm. So this program is about 4 years old. It started with one persona, one C-suite persona. We had the CFO, and we've grown it every year with adding additional personas and different tracks. We're up to 6 now because we feel like we need to constantly reimagine or reinvent what we're doing to keep it fresh for the C-suite audience. You know, they're not an easy group to engage, and we need to do a lot of testing and learning we have done over the years to get to a place where we really feel like we've nailed it. So like I said, we have 6 tracks. The story we told for ITSMA was the whole 4-year story of how we got to where we are. We've I want to say we've smashed our records every year for the goals that we have set. It continues to outperform our expectations, which is great. And, I guess I just say that, if I think about the reason why we set it up in the first place at Optum, it was because this is an audience, as I said, is really hard to engage, but this is an audience really hard to build trust with. They don't trust us as marketers. They don't trust our company. That's not where their trust lies. they trust each other. So I think I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that later, but that is our C-suite persona program. So I have an amazing team. They do all the work, and this was the culmination of it this year.
Thank you, Leslie, and congratulations again. I'm excited to learn more as we talk about how you went about building that trust. But now on to you, Ryan. Same question to you, but more from the advertiser perspective. So what's your greatest achievement in the last years over from an advertiser perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So top of the list definitely has to be a pharma first, which was really exciting to run on LinkedIn. So I'm happy to kind of speak through our LinkedIn case study high level. During COVID, difficult times to get in front of doctors, especially in person. So, digitally, we moved in that direction. So looking to cut through the noise and clutter and really get directly up front and center with our HCPs to announce a new indication for one of our drugs. We wanted to figure out a way to get to them directly. So in order to do so, we wanted to leverage LinkedIn's sponsored messaging campaign, which for those of you who aren't familiar is kind of like emails on steroids. While this was a pharma pilot program overall and has been, and we've run those in the past, what was specific to this was working directly with our LinkedIn reps and the client in order to do what's called a reminder ad in the healthcare space. So these reminder ads are basically ads that do not make a specific claim and therefore do not necessitate important safety information within the ad unit. So all of that extra verbiage you see on those super long pharma TV commercials, that needs to be stated if you make a claim. So by being able to avoid making a claim, we had a more concise message to get to our HCPs, which greatly reduced the amount of information that they needed to dig through and allows a more streamlined action for our two-pronged goal of both informing them via that email, but then our secondary KPI of driving them to the website. From doing this unique type of placement, the results really spoke for themselves. We saw a 2 times higher open rate than traditional LinkedIn benchmarks and 7 times higher click-through rate of 7% versus 1% against LinkedIn benchmarks. And then as far as on website performance, it was really promising. Seeing traffic coming from LinkedIn was 25% more likely to view all of the efficacy information on the landing page and really learn more about our new indication and launch compared to all other drivers to that landing page, both social and non-social. Beyond that, we also saw an 84% increase in our quality visit rate from LinkedIn traffic compared to our other social traffic drivers. So overall, we gained all of these benefits by being on the right place at the right time and with the right message.
Wow, that is fantastic. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later on, about being in the right place and at the right time. But also, I wanted to let everyone know that the link both to the case study and both to the ITSMA award was just placed in the chat for your access. So let's jump on to optimizing the right social media channel. So we have seen the pandemic that reshape kind of operations for healthcare marketers, right? For instance, the industry saw a significant increase in digital spending, about 14%. And, while marketers are adjusting to being more digital, healthcare audience are definitely spending more time online and in new places. So the question that I'd like to ask is, how did you each shift your audience during the pandemic? Because Leslie, you talked about the C-suite and going after that. Ryan, I would like to hear your thought as a social media practitioner, how you've done that. So Leslie, I'm going to let you rest a little bit. And Ryan, this time I'm going to start with you.
Sure thing. So fortunately, during the pandemic, we had already kind of grown our grassroots campaigns as far as having footprints across a lot of different social channels. So we were able to quickly activate and pivot based on the change in the market and change of, HCP types of user behavior. So not seeing reps anymore, things of that as well as on the DTC side, maybe an aversion to maybe going directly to the doctor's office or embracing telehealth. So what this allowed us to do was kind of restructure our media buys that may be more traditional or kind of in person, so say like a billboard or something of that nature, and move that to a digital platform. So looking at what campaigns we were currently running on social media to reach patients, caretakers, or doctors, and kind of doing a inflection to heavy up spend against them to make sure that we were getting the right messages out and the right frequency, but then also, depending on the goal of the campaign, broadening our targeting to make sure that we weren't missing people with that extra spend. So really being dynamic during COVID, understanding how the landscape is changing, and really realizing and seeing just platform usage spiking and taking advantage of that.
Yeah, and I think the word is really being dynamic. You really had to really being agile in this space. Leslie, how about you?
All right. Well, you know what? I just realized I neglected to share with you the construct of this program, and I think it's important to this question. So, as I said, we have 6 tracks to this program, but there's 3 personas. So we focus on CEOs, CFOs, and CMOs, and I like to tell people to think of those through the lens of strategic, financial, and clinical. So the content that we're creating, that we're putting through this highly integrated, multi-touch, multi-channel campaign that runs with continuity year over year is that's just important to know. So the other tracks are subscription and a special one for data and emerging tech kind of topics, that kind of thing. So when COVID hit, our company in its entirety stopped marketing. I mean, we went dark. The only thing that we were putting out in market was COVID-related communications. So the program that we were running stopped. Everything that we had in market, we pulled, because I think at the time we were talking about margin growth, which was just not a good topic to be talking about when COVID hit. That was not what our audience was going to want to be reading. Inappropriate. So we pivoted quickly. We stopped our program and immediately focused on standing up a blog that was consumer focused. So it was called Community Circle Blog. And we'd never done anything like that at Optum before. It was really fun, a lot of work. We put out 3 to 4 blogs a week. That's a lot of communication from us, given our processes and review cycles. In healthcare, things tend to go through more steps than some other industries for approvals. And when we were able to start communicating again through our regular program, we launched a program we called Navigating Forward. And I think on one of the previous slides, Alex had a picture of it up there. So this was a 6-month program that we ran. We launched it with the first asset being Healthcare Beyond Crisis, 8 forces that will define the future. And this is one of the single most downloaded assets in the history of Optum. It's a great white paper. And then we followed it up with one called Economic Aftershock, the economic fallout from COVID-19. And then from there, we went into a series. So those were all C-suite assets. They were relevant to all the personas. And then we went into persona-specific article series that was based on those 8 forces. So that program ran for the next 6 months and was so successful, we carried that Navigating Forward theme into 2021.
Wow, that's fascinating. And you know what is so interesting about this, as I'm seeing the chat rolling, is that everybody has so many questions around this, both for you and Ryan. So we're going to take questions definitely at the end. So keep them coming, because we're going to dig deeper so that you can get some of those questions answered. So thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Ryan. Trust. Trust continues to be a big and always is a conversation. So trust in the virtual world. We saw 77% of respondents want brand to talk about how they're helpful in the new every day. 70% want brands to offer a reassuring tone. And this is more of a research that was done by Cantor that shows that consumers are looking for more consistent and reliable information when it comes to brand. And so the question that I have for you is, how have you invested in new digital channels, if you have? And if you did they fit into your existing strategy and business objectives, or this was something that you shift? And if you haven't, why didn't you? So Leslie, we'll start with you.
Okay, so boy, trust. So our program, the content is 100% pure thought leadership. Although it is a demand gen program, to date, we have gated our content, et cetera, because we want to know who's downloading it. That's how we learn. And it also helps fill the funnel for the rest of the organization to access, those new contexts that we're putting in. But we want to ensure that our C-suite audience, and we've learned this over time, in order to build trust with them, we need to talk to them. So we are creating content and promotional packages around it that let that C-suite persona know the content is specifically for them. We wrote it for a CFO. So Mr. CFO, here is this article for you on X. Here, Miss CEO, this is for you. And that has worked really well. We carry that through our channels. So as we look at how we promote, this program runs like an engine. We put out, I might be getting ahead of myself here, but we put out at least 2 new thought leadership assets out a month. And in some cases, they are persona specific. So you can do the math. That's multiple pieces going out in market. And then we create a promotional package around that. That includes social media. That's a big channel for us. We put a significant portion of our budget behind it because we find it works really well with the C-suite audience. We do engage them through this channel. So, but we're making sure that the ads we're running, we have multiple ads, and they're specific to who we want to talk to. And that they know that by clicking on it, the end result is they're going to get something that was written specifically for them. So, overall, our editorial calendar is really not dictated, but we design it around the company imperatives, right? We want to develop messaging that's going to support what the company wants us to be talking about in market, but we also want to keep our eye on trends. Things happen, as was proven last year when COVID hit. You have to be agile in your program to be able to adapt to, changing market dynamics. And this program does a really good job of that.
Thanks, Leslie. What I hear you saying is that, even when your strategy, right, you tweaked it and you were agile, but you still were focusing on the relevancy within the audience between each of those C-suite members to drive your outcomes, which is great. Ryan, what about you?
Sure, Leslie, those are really great insights. I love how you brought up some audience segmentation, which I think we'll talk through later in this chat. But overall, as far as using different networks, figuring out what's going to work for your media mix, if you really want to run a multi-channel social media campaign, I think you need to take a step back and kind of reassess your actual business goals and align them to your marketing funnel. So I'd say from a high level recommendation, when you're doing considerations for these channels, just keep in mind that all of these networks do 3 types of core campaign goals, but some kind of lean one direction or another where they might kind of have more added value. So those 3 main objectives are awareness, which really focuses on getting mass reach and frequency to broader audiences, and kind of just explains, who we are and what is the key thing you should know about our brand or product. The second one being consideration, which is kind of more mid-funnel, where you're trying to get the right people to get more information about your product and understand its benefit by maybe driving traffic to a website or creating engagement on the posts that you're putting out. And then finally, you have conversion objective, which in the healthcare industry is actually more so retention or sustainability. And that can be, completing a purchase for an e-commerce company or getting people to a specific part of your website or signing up for your CRM. So those are all examples of different ad objectives that all of the networks leverage or kind of have access to. But that being said, they all kind of specialize in things. So for example, if you're really just trying to do, awareness campaigns on platforms, you've got some great channels like YouTube, Reddit, and TikTok to kind of drive that mass awareness and help scope out, new potential patients or HCPs. while maybe you're letting different ad units on a LinkedIn, a Twitter, or a Facebook help drive those deeper funnel metrics where you're trying to get driving of consideration or those conversion campaigns. So really need to kind of take a broad lens and look at how you're using each of the networks to kind of get your desired result and see if the juice is worth the squeeze.
So alignment to market funnel is really key, is what I'm hearing you say, and then really figuring out what networks plays into that. So with that in mind, Ryan, because I'm going to stay with you, let's talk about paid versus organic. I hear this come up so often. And so I want to understand from your perspective, as you talked about these different channels, how do you manage those two channels and identify what should be organic, what should be paid, and not only what, but when should organic be boosted?
That's a great question. I think that's something that every marketer has to deal with, is really kind of identifying that. So for my background, I do work in paid social. I specialize in that. So I'm going to start by saying a very biased saying and say everything you put on social should have paid media behind it. But, I kid, but in all seriousness, a lot of platforms, if you look historically, have deprioritized the prominence of branded organic content over the past 15 years. So there's a lot of factors to consider, what should be organic, what should be paid. But I, again, take a step back and define your overarching business goals and build an organic and paid social plan around those goals while leaving some wiggle room for experimentation on what you're calling organic and maybe putting some paid behind it. So if I were to kind of give an example and walk you through, I think e-commerce is much easier to kind of understand. So more direct response campaigns, let's pretend we're a retailer or e-tailer who already has a decent organic presence on social media. And our overarching goal is to build brand recognition and trust with my store while also driving sales. Maybe from an organic standpoint, I'm letting my followers see my organic content that'll focus on what a reputable retailer I am and my brand values to help foster that loyalty or catch a passerby who stumbles across my social media page from word of mouth or an email campaign. Again, something you can always boost a little bit later, but moving to something more measurable from a paid perspective, maybe on paid social, you want to leverage other channels where people are maybe driving to, your e-tail store, they're getting to a cart and they're abandoning before they finish checkout. So maybe 20% or 80% of people abandon the cart before they come back. So maybe I have an evergreen paid social campaign that's not living live organically on my page, but is retargeting those users who leave something in the cart to give them a 10% coupon to incentivize them to come back and complete that purchase. So that's a high level.
I stopped hearing Ryan.
I think you
Might
may
have
have
things,
him.
but that's good. But I think really what Ryan was saying at a high level is, and I think it always goes back to your business strategy, making sure that, you have, when you have a business strategy, your objectives, making sure that you're aligning to that first and foremost. Des, while we get Ryan back, let's try to jump into a poll. This is a great time. So you get ready, everyone. We're giving you time. Are you currently using a combined organic and paid strategy? So A, yes. B, not yet, but interested in implementing. And again, C, no clue, just getting started. So roll the poll.
Poll's coming up. 1 minute.
How are we doing?
Can't see. We're having a bit of difficulties.
Oh, with the
Well,
poll.
but I love people are putting in the chat.
Oh,
All right,
I
we're
love
going with
it.
technology. I love it. I love it.
Thank
So
you.
one
bearing
for
with us.
yes, two. Let's see. Okay, thank you, Demetrius and my tech. Thank you, Demetrius.
This is it's funny because we talk about the virtual world and how things will happen with our technology, but as a consultant and giving speeches and both in you know, whether you're virtual or not, things can happen. So thank you for your patience with us.
I think we can end the poll. It's coming up. Can we share the results?
Okay, so the majority, about 61% says yes, looking like 28% says not yes, and 12% is just getting started. Awesome. Sounds good. Fantastic. Okay, capturing and engaging healthcare audiences. We'll start there. Leslie, can you still there? Great.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Awesome. So initially we talked about the right place to reach our audience, and now we want to talk about the right message. So how does your team develop content that centers on the right audience? Like you talked a little bit about that early on, as you talked about the relevancy of how the various C-suite that you go after, how they want to engage with each other. But would be curious to see how your team is developing content around that.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, what's interesting is with the personas, and we did a fair bit of persona research so we could really understand these three personas, and not only them, but also by market that they're in. So a provider CEO might act a little different than a payer CEO. So we understand those nuances, and we understand how they like to get information, in what format, and where they like to find it. So we target the build up and execution of our plan around that information that we have. Excuse me. And over the years, we have, again, proven it out, refined. We continue to update our personas on a regular basis so that we're staying true to them. So we're creating content, again, that's based on an editorial narrative direction that the company wants to go in. We do create content at this level for C-suite that crosses our enterprise, meaning it would be content that's relevant to providers. That's anybody who provides care, large health systems, hospitals, et cetera. Payers, health plans, insurance companies, government, life sciences, employers, which is basically every company in the world. So that's our target audience. So we're creating thought leadership at that altitude, and doing our best to make it relevant across those different industries and personas. It's not just print copy that we're creating, like white papers and infographics and things like that. We do a lot of videos and webinars and roundtable events. They're just any type of content that you can think of, we create it in some way, shape, or form. Articles, podcasts, everything. As far as the topics go, we're fortunate that we have a deep pool of subject matter expertise at the organization. And we have a thought leadership company that we own in the advisory board, who does nothing but research. And we're able to leverage those internal subject matter experts and our partners at advisory board to who are keeping their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the market. So we are going to drive to our narratives that are set over the year, and of what we want to lean into. So think of value-based care as one, health equity as one, consumerism as one, that kind of thing. And then we're going to leverage our subject matter experts and our own research, right, to determine what are the topics within those that we are going to create content out and put in market. Does that get you what you were looking for, Alex?
Absolutely. And I think you might have answered my other question, unless you have more to share there, but is it the subject matter experts where you find new ideas for your new content or your research, or are there other places as well that you go to find new ideas?
Yeah, so we definitely, subject matter experts for sure, but they are not the only place. We are constantly understanding the market, whether it's through talking to people, whether it's through the own research that we're doing, whether it's through our own, memberships to different associations, et cetera. We read all the time to industry type publications to learn about I must subscribe to 100 different newsletters. I don't read them all cover to cover, but if they have a good subject line, they'll hook me. So I'm looking for trends of what, what's happening in the market. But we're a big company and we get a lot of people that are doing that. So that is also fed to me, that, this is something that we want to lean into. So I don't just make them up on my own. It takes a village. And we want to ensure, again, that we're being agile and flexible in our editorial schedule, and creating content as quickly as we can, because that's the other thing. It's like, you got to get it out now. It can't take 6 weeks to get something in market. I would say, in addition, we do a lot of testing with what we are putting out, as far as our, answering back on your question of engaging or developing content centered on the audience. Subject lines, headlines, I just mentioned that. That's important. So like when we do social media, we'll put 3 or 4 ads out there, different formats, carousel, static, animated, whatever. And they'll all be different. And we're going to test that creative, and then we're going to see how it performs. And whichever one's winning, we'll lean heavier into that with budget. We might pull the other ones down. We've had some social where typically we'd run it for 6 weeks that ends up running all year.
I think if you don't mind me just asking you another question as it relates to that, in terms of your testing. And what I love is the fact that you're not just taking one approach, you're taking multiple approaches, right? Because you want to see what's working. So in that, how long do you test?
Yeah, well, it can be really fast, if it's email. So when we create an asset, I think I said, we'll create the asset, I'll call it a source asset. And then we create the supplemental content that we need to efficiently and effectively promote that asset, whatever it is. And that can include the emails, of which we'll do 2, always 2, and A/B test the subject line and pre-header text. And then we'll do our social ads, which are organic and paid always. We want to leverage both channels, and and could be persona specific as well. So there could be many of those. But for any one persona, same thing. We're going to do 2 or 3, and we're going to test. We'll know pretty quick. With an email, we'll know, within 24 hours. We'll know within 5 minutes sometimes, but within 24 hours, we should have a pretty good idea. So before we do a resend, then we know which one we're going to go with. So that's email. With social, we're just monitoring those results real time, right? What's working, and working with our LinkedIn rep to shift budget. And we have a role at Optum that's like a liaison role called a digital strategist that helps us with making that happen. Because as you can imagine, it's a lot of, it takes a lot of time to keep your eyeballs on all of that when we have to be creating new stuff to put in market. So
I was going to ask that. I was going to say it must take a village. Des, did we get Ryan back?
Hey, I'm back.
Oh, fantastic. Right. Great time, Ryan. So same question to you. Leslie was just talking about developing content that centers on the audience. And so what is top of mind for your team when building content and social campaigns?
Yeah, absolutely. Leslie had some really great insights into, creating great content and always testing it out. So that's definitely always top of mind for us, seeing what works as we're running. But overall, we kind of take an audience first centric approach to our content. So like I was speaking through earlier before I cut out, throughout different layers of the funnel, figuring out your audience segmentation to really help you build the right type of creative to reach the right person at the right time, depending on where they're sitting within your marketing funnel, consideration within the audiences, and needing to know like what objective goes with what types of message or ad that you're creating. So for instance, you wouldn't just want to randomly hit someone directly with an email sign up ad who doesn't know who your brand is or who hasn't taken a deeper action, like engaging with your content in the past or visiting your website CRM page, right? That would just be a little bit weird. Like, I don't know you. It's kind of like asking someone for their number before giving them your name. So, a more ideal path is kind of creating awareness and saying like, hi, I'm Ryan. Moving down the funnel and creating consideration by saying, I really like digital media and Star Wars. And then finally trying to convert someone and say, I like your take on Baby Yoda. What's your number so I can send you some funny memes? Right? That's an organic human type of interaction, but that's what we're trying to translate from social onto digital. So it's that type of interaction, understanding how to guide someone through that conversation and make them really connect with you, and making sure that content is telling that same type of story and getting your brand story and objectives across. And then as far as a content perspective, I definitely recommend, always checking your news feed, seeing what's trending, download new apps. If a new social network comes out, who knows if it'll be a hit or a miss, but you never know what's going to come. So for instance, TikTok, great example, something that started, they did a really great job with, watermarking their content they were producing on there. It made it very easy to mash up videos and sync it with the music that you're taking. So great example of that and how that proliferated out. So that's an example of, oh, people love these short form videos that are lip synced or include dancing. And then beyond just like trying out new content types and apps from what you see organically, also just take some time to listen. So I recommend that all brands really do kind of a deep dive around their actual vertical, to do some social listening and around their vertical and their brand to really understand how are people talking about your industry or your product vertical, as well as your own brand. So really listen and take that in and take your takeaways. Understand what are the keywords that they're using when they're talking about your brand or your products. What are the habits that they're doing? So for instance, during COVID, there was a large pharma conference that was usually in person in Chicago. And of course, it was remote for COVID. So it was really interesting from a social listening perspective. We usually get insights as far as data shares, HCP opinions on new data releases and things of that nature. But what we actually saw on Twitter was live discussion of HCPs going back and forth about different findings, arguing with each other with customized memes that they were actually making on their own. So we watched this whole conversation unfold, and there were something like 10 doctors, which is just very rare in pharma to see. And we took that insight, brought it to the client, and made a content plan to do an ad set with some meme-like content to see if it would resonate more with that audience. And, kind of letting everyone know, like, oh, we know doctors are people too.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And that's so innovative to find new ways for content. That's great. And I love the fact that you used an analogy around Baby Yoda. How could you not remember this after having that type of example? Okay, as I look at the time, both, and I want to get to Q&A, but I want to know from both of you, what learnings have you gained in the last 2 years? So the last 2 years have been an extraordinarily one, right? And we had to do so many different shifts. There was so much that you had to change and manage. So what have you learned, and what will you take into the future as you go forward? So Ryan, I'll start with you.
Sure. As far as learnings, I think it's, it really, people are willing to pick up new trends and new habits. I think that age delineation or generational delineation isn't as finite or structured as we're used to seeing. So the difference between Gen Z to millennials, obviously that's pretty smooth. But then as far as your golden population, your baby boomers, they're all learning these habits. So people can learn and adopt. So I think never count something out before you see where it goes. I think the joke that I always tell clients is kind of like, hey, the question is, are 60-year-old doctors really on Instagram? And then my response is like, well, if their kids are putting photos of their kids up on the platform, they're going to figure out how to use it. So always be adaptable and keep testing things. Just because you do research once doesn't mean that those numbers won't change. Secondly, it's really ties back to always be flexible with the changing tech landscape. So learn as much as you can. We have a lot of new privacy concerns and issues coming up, but at the end of the day, if your marketing plan is solid, your same triggers or similar triggers should still hold true. So always be ready to be flexible.
Love that. Love that. Leslie?
Boy, I could just mirror what Ryan just said. I think that flexibility piece is really important, and we we're all tested on that over the past couple of years. So that was one of the first things I just jotted down was agility and perseverance. I think that's another big takeaway from the last couple of years. Just so much change, and the fact that, you know, boy, we challenged ourselves and realized, wow, we can pivot and we can ensure that we're being meaningful in market with what we're talking about. We've learned a lot about our personas over the past couple of years, because as the change, you know, as healthcare landscape is changing, they're changing also. And so we have to learn how are they changing so that we can adapt our marketing to them. And we also did a lot of expansion over the last couple of years into that cross enterprise I was talking about. So where we had focused a lot on payer and provider early on in the program, like first couple of years, then it was moving into employer and government, life sciences, different animal, different personas, different, you know, interests and way to talk to them. Like an employer will talk to a chief health, human resources officer. You know, we hadn't done that before. So we're learning more and more about the C-suite, and those are my last 24 months takeaways.
And what you will take away, what you will take into the future as you go forward over the next 24, I presume.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk before we, Des, we're going to set up that we jump right into Q&A. But before we do that, I'd like to just kind of talk about what we've learned today here, some takeaways, whether it is capturing and engaging healthcare audiences on social media. We heard that we need to focus on your strategy around not only around your customers' interests, but also their habits. So that was a big takeaway that we heard. We also heard that optimizing the right social media, you need to choose the right channels for your objectives. Different goals require different activations. And finally, test and test and test, and then learn and keep testing. So your audience is changing and where they're spending their time is changing. So you need to really be agile, test new channels as you move your product forward. So with that, I want to thank Leslie and I want to thank Ryan so much for your time and for sharing what you've learned. And now I want to open it up to Q&A.
And
do you want to do feedback too?
Yes, can we get feedback? And there's been a lot of conversation happening today. Thank you so much, Leslie and Ryan. We're going to jump in Q&A. But before we do, feedback is a gift. Would love to launch a poll to really assess how likely are you to recommend this conversation to a colleague or friend? This would really help us understand, does this resonate? Would you like to understand best practices, both from someone on the client side or customer side, really perfecting the C-suite? Ryan also shared his expertise being on different social media platforms. Please vote, give us feedback. If you want to drop feedback in the chat, that is welcome as well. We want to make sure we're providing content and insights. I know there were some comments before mentioned, the slides, you couldn't follow along. This is really about actively listening. Some of these examples that are provided today are real time, and we really wanted to make sure they were relevant given the dynamic environment as well as the audiences that we're targeting. So please, even if you want to describe the session in one word, you could drop that in the chat while you fill out the poll. Demetrius, how are we doing? Are we ready to close the poll? Get your votes in. And I am teeing up the questions while we do that. And with that, thank you. Thank you. We shared the results. We believe in transparency. So thank you for your feedback. I can't see it on my screen, but I hope it's looking good, and it's okay if it isn't, because we will
think the majority is about a 6, and then the rest is just spiced across. But for the most part, it's good. It seems to be valuable.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, let's transition into Q&A. And I will say that there are a lot of questions coming in specifically regarding social media best practices. So Ryan, I will start with you. The question was, and this is from Marissa Bottoli, what is the right frequency and optimal times when posting on social media? And I felt that was really generic, so I will turn it to you to kind of narrow the scope, whether it's pharma or insurance, and just help us understand that.
Yeah, that's a great question and something that I think every marketer has to ask themselves. So again, kind of looking at that organic lens or that paid lens, I think there are some best practices. It all depends on like what platform you're on. So they're all going to be unique and different. You can find some high level tips as far as, on Instagram, maybe it's like Tuesdays at like 5 p.m. is a high traffic time. But really, I think a lot of it is just kind of experimenting with what you already own and seeing what those results are. So if you are purely organic, test the reach and frequency of your organic presence and see how many, impressions and engagements you get during different timeframes so you can compare. The other thing too is if you do run a paid social campaign, you can actually break out the data and see when audiences are engaging by day of week as well as time. So you can find those high value time allotments to kind of help order up and figure out when to post organically because your audience that you're trying to get to is more likely to be available since they're engaging with your content at that time. But there's no perfect formula. It's just a lot of test and learn.
Absolutely. Thank you. And with that, I know one of the things you mentioned today was really listening. We've shared this before in the chat, but we've provided an infographic just in general with healthcare, which provides insights to the various audiences that are available on LinkedIn. What are some of the trending content? It includes like, what are some of the highest performing hashtags or highest trending hashtags that we're seeing in general across the platform, as well as how are brands showing up, both from at the corporate level, so brand level, as well as the individual levels. We talked about trust, and we talked about, given what's happening in this pandemic, we're seeing a lot of consumers as well as executives, just individuals being more purposeful and in terms of how they show up and give back to the community. So that is shared with you for more information. And Leslie, I would love to turn to you next. Given your experience, not just with targeting the C-suite, but you mentioned that throughout your tenure as a healthcare expert and marketer, you've targeted various audiences, whether it's payers, whether it's state or federal. There was a question regarding insurers, and I know that's not an audience you probably target or you have targeted before. Do you have any insights regarding this audience? And have you ever used LinkedIn? Because someone in the chat was like, I don't think this audience is on LinkedIn, and I'm not sure. So I was just curious to see if you had a POV on that.
Yeah, so I might be able to help a little bit, but you're absolutely right. Insurance is not my, that's not my background. I do work for a company that has a large insurance arm, but that's not ours on the Optum side. I think we had to learn with social media platforms which worked best for our target audience. And, I haven't always targeted the C-suite. There's other segments that we target, influencers, et cetera. There's so many different ways you can slice and dice to get what you're looking for. We align to that funnel that Ryan's been talking about as well. We just happen to be filling it at the epiphany stage at the very top in this program. But we tested. I go back to testing. We tested all the platforms. For instance, I don't use Twitter at all because I found I can't reach my audience on Twitter, but I can on LinkedIn. Insurance, depending on whether you're going after consumers or you're actually going after insurance companies, I'm not sure what you're after there, but if it's B2C, you're going to look at those channels like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and probably less of a LinkedIn approach. But there's some easy testing you can do, and social intelligence. Take a subset of your list, and it's a little bit of a manual process, or you can find a vendor partner. But I did that for a program a few years ago, and we went in and we found from our list how many were active on LinkedIn, how many were active on Twitter. And then how active were they? So was it worth us investing in that channel? And that's how we approached it. So I don't know, again, whether you're B2B, B2C, but I would say it's always worth a test.
Thank you. And with that, the next question that came up for both Ryan and Leslie was, can you specifically, would each speaker please provide, someone just added a question, would each speaker please give us a quick demographic description of their target audience?
I'm happy to check.
Go ahead, Leslie.
No, you go ahead, Ryan. I just talked.
Okay, I'll formulate right now. No, I think that, so that's a really tough question. Again, it's all the myriads of segmentation that you're leveraging. So depending on what type of drug I'm working on, that's going to vary a lot. But overarching, my overall audience, and again with specific caveats and messages, are HCPs, so doctors or nurses. We have our patients as well as the caregivers, people who are helping make those decisions for the person they're taking care of. So it's a very broad demographic, and there's a lot of inflection points where we can use things for targeting. So like Leslie mentioned, if you have a CRM list, things of that nature, doing that in an anonymized way and HIPAA compliant way to kind of get that core audience. Building off of that, kind of that midsection, retargeting people who have visited your website on different platforms, as well as third-party data vendors. Maybe they're using contextual targeting so that you can expand a little bit more, but still have a concise type of mid-funnel targeting. And then at the broadest endpoint, just kind of, that first-party targeting that's available on the platforms. So whether that's, finding people by job title or company that they work at LinkedIn, or just first-party interests on Facebook for people who are, interested in Alzheimer's awareness or things of that nature. Kind of, doing that multi-level targeting and then measuring each of those segments separately to see, how that affects your campaign and how people are responding to your ads, both on the platform and then ultimately on your website.
Thank you. And the next question I have, and this question has popped up twice. So I think people are just very curious for the Trigriso sponsored messaging campaign. What was the range and the audience size? The range in terms of, and you could say if you can't say it, but they were just very curious. That came up 3 times, so I thought I would ask regarding the campaign that you worked on.
Sure, absolutely. I can't share specifics, but it was definitely a bit more expensive than a used car, but definitely approachable for most people. As far as that audience size, it was actually a good size, but again, a very similar methodology where we had direct targeting as far as who we knew on our list, which made it small, right? We have a degradation of, here's a total list of, making this up, 10,000 people. Of that, 7,000 matched, which is great. To really fill that out, doing that broader targeting and including some of the LinkedIn self-identified information. So job title and things of that really grew that list to make sure that we could measure separately how our target list did, but then also do that broader reach across a specialty group instead of just really being hyper-focused.
Thank you. And I'll ask the last question to Leslie, who didn't get to answer the question before, the demographics of the audience that you're targeting. And I will tag on the final question, which is it's a good one. Like, any tips on your thought leadership topics for 2022? We know you're big on innovating and capturing these audiences. So the audience is super excited to hear any insights from you. And then after that, Alex, I would love to turn it over to you to take us home and close us out.
All right. So, well, as far as demographics go, as I indicated, we have our 3 primary personas. For the first few years of the program, we focused only on payer and providers. That's pretty narrow. There's only 257 payer organizations in the country and around 6,000 provider organizations. So it's a finite number. We are able to, target with a laser beam into that market. Employer, it starts to get a lot broader, and we have to do a lot more segmenting to focus in on who we want to get our message to. which would be like a chief HR officer, that kind of person. Government has some odd titles. Their titling system doesn't necessarily align to the corporate world. And so they're, and it's kind of all over the place. So I won't go deep there, but we also do CIOs because we have our data and emerging tech program. So that would be our more technical audience. I agree with Ryan 100%. Retargeting is great. These channels, we're with LinkedIn today. They're a great example, but other channels as well with third party, you're able to segment their list. You can target, you can look at it and you can say, this is who I want to reach. I mean, with LinkedIn, you can do it down to a single person, which is pretty amazing. So yeah, that's what I would say. We don't do a ton of influencer marketing at this point in this program, but certainly have in other ones. And again, it's the same thing. You're just segmenting and you're tracking and you're seeing who's engaging and is it working? And if it's not, what lever do we need to pull to make sure that it is? As far as topics for 2022, boy, you'll all laugh at me, but we're really just getting started on the planning for that because everything's moving so dynamically right now in the market. We want to make sure that we are rolling out with, with the right stuff. So workforce is a big one in healthcare, just like I think in the rest of the world, you've got the Great Resignation and all of that. There's workforce shortages and burnout and, et cetera. Those probably cover both of them. So that's a big topic that we'll lean into, I believe, in 2022. And, as healthcare continues the shift from fee for service to fee for value, so that value-based care space, we do continue to talk about that in market. That will continue to be big because at the end of the day, we're still reaching for the triple aim, which is, lower cost, better quality, and better outcomes.
Awesome. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, audience, for being here. We really appreciate your time. And please download the infographics. And if we didn't get to your questions, we certainly can follow up with us. But want to wish everyone a very happy holiday, a safe holiday over the last 2 years. It's been a lot. I hope that you all get to spend time with your loved ones. And we thank you for being here and have a very, very wonderful weekend. Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you.